In this Blender tutorial, I will show you how to create 3D printable wall art. I recently came across this website where you can purchase templates for DIY wall art made out of paper, and I immediately thought this could be 3D printed. Until I realized that they even sell 3D models for exactly that. I think their prices are reasonable, and if you like their designs, then go ahead and support them. No, I'm not affiliated, but being a Blender head with geometry nodes in my toolbox, I simply had to try and make my own. I found this a square canvas in my daughter's art supplies, don't tell her, and made a prototype. I created the spikes in Blender, similar to what we are going to do in this tutorial, embossed a number on the bottom of every spike using geometry nodes, printed 100 pieces individually, and glued them to the canvas. Bamboo Lab liked this project so much that they kindly sent over some of their white marble filament. Thank you. That's gonna be great for making another bigger panel. So in this video I will show you the entire Blender workflow to create the 3D models for this kind of wall art / sound diffuser, and then I will show you the perfect slicer settings, the actual 3D prints, and how to put together the final panel. The finished blend file is available at patreon.com/chrisp. Now let's jump into Blender. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a tutorial. I'm using Blender 4.3, which is currently in alpha, but any Blender version 4 you can use to follow along. Delete everything, and then I have to add a grid, but I have to figure out how big that should be first. So my canvas is a 70 by 50 centimeters. I'm calculating in millimeters here. I want to leave a 3 centimeter border all around. Just maybe to make it look more like a picture with a frame. So I have to take off 60 millimeters on the width and the height, which leaves me with 64 and 44 centimeters. I want each spike, I'm gonna call them spikes, I want the base of each spike to be a 4 by 4 centimeter square, okay, 40, which works out perfectly to have a 16 by 11 divisions, which gives me a total of 176 spikes. Okay, so 16 by 11. Over here, shift a mesh grid, and down here in the grid settings, I have to plug in 16 by 11. And then if I go into edit mode, I now have 16 by 11. Now this is still a square. Of course, my canvas is not square, and I can change the size to be the actual correct size of 64 centimeters by 44 centimeters. And now these should be 4 by 4 squares. Okay, next I'm gonna hit Ctrl A and apply the scale, just so we work with a scale factor of 1 here. And my modifications of the size is now baked into the mesh. Now, if I go into edit mode and I go to face select and I move this face, you can see everything is connected. However, I need individual squares so I can make individual spikes. Okay. Easy way to do that is to mesh split faces by edges. And if I take one now and move it, it's its own thing. Okay, so now I have 176 individual squares in my geometry. Okay, I'm gonna select everything, extrude, and I will extrude by 0.04, which is also 40 millimeters or 4 centimeters. And now I have cubes. All right, now I still have the top selected, and with that, I'm gonna add a vertex group, call it top, and assign this selection to this vertex group because I will use and need this later. And the next thing we have to do is we jump right into geometry nodes. Geometry nodes, create a new node tree, and we're gonna do some stuff in here. Okay, now up here, maybe this is a little bit boring. Let's switch this over to matcap and like this, and switch on cavity. Okay, so I want to move, or I want to scale the top faces down to make sort of spiky shapes. So what do we have to do? In edit mode, we have to select the top face, and if I scale this in now, I get a single spike like that. Okay, of course I could do this manually, but with geometry nodes I can do this for all 176 spikes. So how can we scale a face down to its center, well, we would have to take this vertex and move it towards the center. Take this vertex, move it towards the center, and so on. How do we get the center of the face to do that? That's easy. We just capture an attribute on the face domain. And which attribute are we capturing? We're gonna capture the position. Okay. So what's the position of a face? Well, it's the face center. So now we have this position here, and that's that. Okay, how do we move geometry in geometry nodes? Well, we have to use a set position node. And the position that we're moving everything to is going to be this center. Now you can see that we're not just moving at the top, but we're moving all of the vertices. So we can limit this by using the selection. If I drag this out and use a named attribute, and I click here, you can see there's a named attribute called top, which is exactly our vertex group that we created before. So now we're only moving the top. Yes, we're still moving the vertex down also, not just inwards. And that is, I think, because we're moving sort of to the average of the face centers, something. I'm not quite sure, but it's okay for what we need here, because we always want a little bit of a square on top. We really don't want any super pointy spikes, right? Okay, but this is now very uniform because we're just moving everything to this position. We don't want that. We want to mix. So we need a mix node based on a vector math. We want to mix this position with the original position of the vertex. And that should be our result. So we need to plug in another position in here. Position. Okay. And now we have this slider here. Not mixing at all, or mixing a lot. Maybe we should flip this over. We'll see. Okay. By the way, I get this question quite frequently for my geometry nodes tutorials. Is there a difference between plugging this position in here and a separate position node in here? No, there isn't. I can just use this the same way, same thing. Why? Because this set position node is working on its input geometry. The input geometry has 1,408 vertices. So we're setting the position of a vertex here, or of all of the vertices. And this node looks through this geometry nodes, node tree from right to left. So it goes, okay, what's the new position? It's a mix of this and this. Okay, what is this? The position. And in this case, since we're working on a vertex geometry, on a mesh, it's the position of the vertex. And it doesn't matter if it looks this way and reads the position like this, or if it reads the position like this. It's the same information that it has to read. And this node reads the position of a face. So this node also looks from right to left and just reads a position. However, I like to do it like this, just because I think, especially for tutorials, it is more clear, right? So we're setting the position to its original position mixed in with a different position. Okay, so now we have this factor here, which is cool. However, it's kind of boring because it's all of the cubes are moving the same way now. Instead of just a single factor, we can plug in a texture here. So let's see, let's go to texture and let's take a gradient texture. And I'm going to set this to a quadratic sphere. And I can plug this factor in here now, and you can see we get this. So from top view, we get big ones in the middle and then smaller ones on the outside. Cool. But I don't like it in the middle. I want it to be off center a little bit to make it look more interesting. And that's where this vector comes in. This is sort of the coordinate system for this gradient texture. And if we hover over here, we can see the input, since nothing is plugged in, is using position. So it's really the same thing as doing this. Okay, plugging this in didn't change anything. Now I have a position, and now I can use a vector math node. Search vector math. and I can move the center of my coordinate system by adding x, y. Okay. What happens if I set this to multiply? Set everything to 1, and then I multiply this by 2. I'm scaling the x and I'm scaling the y-axis. And remember, I'm scaling and moving the coordinate system of my sphere gradient texture. That's all I'm doing here. And since we always need to multiply and move, there's even a mode for this, and it's called multiply add. So let's reset this to 1. And now we're back in the middle with a multiplier of 1. And now I can move this over maybe to the left here and up like this a little bit. And that gives me this over here. Maybe move even more on the X. Bring it out like this. Okay. And then I would like to mix in another one of these. How can I do that? I just simply copy all of this. Maybe in this case, it's still kind of obvious that this is the same thing, position. Now let's look at what this one looks like, because I'm gonna move that to the bottom right. So let's set this back to 0. Move it over to the right. Move it down to the bottom. And use the multiplier to make it smaller. Okay, now I have to move again. Okay, cool. So we have the one up here, which is this one, and then the one down here. How do we mix these together? This is just a factor between 0 and 1, so we can just use a math node. Mix this one with this one, and really the best mode for this, I think, would be maximum. Plug this in here. So we have a big one and a little one. Let's move the big one more over to the left. Okay, so it looks like this. However, I don't like it that these are so big. They are still almost perfect squares. I want all of them to go a little bit spiky, right? So that's easy to do. This factor here, I'm gonna put in a map range node. Linear from 0 to 1. I'm gonna set this to maybe negative to bring those ones down quite a bit. Okay, so I'm looking down here. I want these to be really the tiniest that we can make them. Okay, something like this. And then the 2 max I can bring down so that these here, the big ones, aren't quite as big. But still we have a little bit of variation. So now we look like this. Cool. So this would be our node tree. Not very complicated. You can screenshot this and then you get this. Okay. Now I want to move these things up on the z-axis a little bit. Because we're moving stuff and we're still moving towards the center, like I said before, we already have a little bit of a curve here, but I want to bring in like more curve. I could do this in geometry nodes. However, we also have proportional editing, which is more of like a manual approach to this whole editing thing. And I kind of like to do this for this. So in order to do that, I'm gonna apply this geometry nodes modifier, because after all, geometry nodes is a modifier. And when we're happy with what we have here, we can apply it, and that bakes the changes that we have here into our mesh. Okay, so let's do that. Just click here and apply. Now if I go into edit mode, this is the mesh. There's no more modifier. This is now baked in. And I'm going to look at it from front view, switch on proportional editing. And then I can go into edit mode, maybe select a vertex. Let's maybe pick this one, move it up, JC. Oh, you have to switch on proportional editing. And then with the mouse wheel, we can change the circle here, the circle size. which is the area of influence for our proportional editing operation. So maybe we want to do something like this. And if I click, I moved this up, but the proportional editing mode took the bottoms with it. I don't want this. I need the bottoms to be down here because that's where I need to glue them to the canvas. So undo this. There's two ways, a quick and dirty way, and I think the good way. So what's the quick and dirty way? We select all of the bottom vertices, hide them in edit mode, then change the top and then unhide the bottom. Okay, it works, but it's kind of, I don't know. I think there's a better way, and this better way is using shape keys. Okay, so in order to use shape keys, we always have to use add the base and then the first shape key. With this selected, I go into edit mode, GZ, bring this up again. And then when I get out of edit mode, I'm back to this. Why? Because the shape key isn't used yet, because this is the factor of shape key usage. And you can see this is one of the cool parts of shape keys, that we don't just have this position or this position. We can actually sort of morph our geometry between. So if we went a little bit overboard with our modification, we can dial it back here. Okay, so let's do something like this. And also, and this is the second cool thing about shape keys, is we can limit the change just to the top vertex group. Now we have this. It's exactly what I want. Cool. And of course we can add more shape keys. So let's do another one. Let's create another shape key, go into edit mode, and maybe bring this one back here up a little bit. So again, from front view, bring it up. Then we have to apply it, and you can see we're mixing these shape keys together. So maybe this should be like that. And again, also, of course, we only want to modify the top. So now it looks like this, which is cool looking. So if you want sort of a valley maybe going in here, we can do this now too. Let's try it. Let's add another shape key. In top view, we go into edit mode and we go, okay, maybe let's create sort of a valley going through this way. GC and bring that down, but we do only a little bit. Okay, like this. And then we apply this shape key, taking stuff down, but also only for the top. Okay, so we get really low ones here. We got really tall ones here. Yeah, this is cool. Of course, we can also go back into the shape key, to edit mode, and go GC. Maybe it was a little bit too much. Or maybe we want the influence to be bigger for our valley that we're trying to create back there. So what does this look like? Yeah, looks kind of cool. Okay. Then also I want to twist stuff. So again, create another shape key, go into edit mode, select maybe one in the center, and then just go rotate. So we're rotating, bring this up, rotate this quite a bit, because this is a really cool effect when you have it 3D printed. I can see that on my prototype. This is like the coolest of the effects actually. Okay, so we do this, which is gonna mean that these are actually moving outside a little bit, but let's see if we turn this up, but only move the top. Are we sticking out yet? Nope. No, this is nice. Of course, you could move it further and then the tops actually stick out of this area here. I'm not sure if I like that. I like it like this. But you do you. Now one more thing I want to show you here in this. We're going to create another shape key. We can go into edit mode, maybe go over to face select mode, and then we select, let's see, what does it look like? So these here are all maybe down here. Let's try it. I just want to show you something. You don't have to do this, but if we select, for example, these 4 faces, and if I go rotate, I'm doing the same thing like I did just now, but I can switch this over to individual origins. So now I'm rotating this around this center, This face I'm rotating around this center, and so on. And with proportional editing, I'm taking the stuff around it with it. Okay, so if this looks too uniform down here, I can go rotate. I'm rotating, you can see, I'm rotating the faces individually. And if I twist it just a little bit maybe, let's see how big is the influence. Just a little bit like this. Go out of edit mode, apply this shape key. Maybe just a little bit. Oh, I should have twisted it the other way. Okay, so go back into edit mode and rotate it this way maybe. Okay. So it looks like this, only for the top. And then actually rotated it back so that they look too uniform now. Let's go back into this. Maybe this way was good. Okay, so it looks like this. You don't have to do this, but you can see that with the shape keys, you can play around with your mesh, and you can only apply it to the top, which is crucial for what we want to do, because they all should be on the bottom, so we can glue them to our canvas. And then you can, if you don't like what you did with this shape key, well then just don't use it at all, or mix it in a little bit less. Okay, next I kind of want to add a bevel up here, but before I do that, we have to talk about something else. And that is twisted faces. So maybe here you can see it. This face here is not flat anymore. So we took the 4 vertices and we kind of twisted it around. So what happens if we throw this onto the 3D printer now? First, we have to export it as an STL file. And by doing that, this will be triangulated. So let's see what happens if we triangulate our mesh. We get, instead of this quad with 4 vertices, we get 2 triangles. And you can see clearly here that these triangles are facing different directions. So if we 3D print this now, we will get this edge going down the side here. Now this is kind of a cool effect, and if you like this, then just export now, 3D print, you're done. I kind of like it if the face is actually twisted, you know, smooth. It has the twist in it. And really the only way to do this is to add more geometry. So how do we add more geometry really easily? We add a subdivision surface modifier, bring it up to the top here, switch it to simple and maybe 2 levels. That should be enough. So now you can see here we have more faces. Now each of these tiny faces is still twisted, but they're tiny faces. So even if we triangulate this now, I don't think we can see this edge going down this face in the final 3D print, especially in the way that we're gonna 3D print this. So stay tuned for that. However, if you think this is not enough, we can also always just increase the subdivisions here. And then I want to add a bevel. I don't want these sharp spiky corners here. So I'm gonna add a bevel modifier to this whole thing, just to round off everything. Now the bevel modifier applied to the angle above 30 degrees. First of all, 30 degrees might not be enough for some of these angles, because I think we have some very shallow angles over here. Yeah, seems to be enough. But you can always turn this down to 10 and then you're sure that you have bevel everywhere. However, I don't want the bevel on the bottom, because this sort of introduces a little gap here. So if you increase the bevel size, this gap is going to get bigger. I don't want the gap. I want this to be completely a filled bottom. On my prototype, I actually had a big gap and I had to glue each spike down individually, leaving this gap. But for this one, I just want everything to be, you know, to have like a complete cover of the canvas on the bottom. So I don't want the bevel down here. And I think I'm just going to switch this over to Vertex group and set it to my top Vertex group. Of course, I don't need this triangulate modifier. This is what I want. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to bevel the top. But because of our subdivision, the top is not just the top anymore, but the top is getting distributed down the sides, everywhere actually. And so now we get this. And I kind of like this, I have to say, because I still don't have anything down here. I still have perfect contact down here, but I do get a bevel on the top and down half of the way. And that would be our finished design that we can now 3D print. We now have everything we need to cut this into pieces, export, slice, 3D print, and glue to the canvas. And I will do all of that in the next video over on my new channel, Crispy Tech. Visit youtube.com/@crispytech or follow the link in the video description and pinned comment. Thanks for watching, subscribe and support below. See you on Crispy Tech.